All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of XS Succeed. This is Gearface. Very happy to be back talking about uh, presidential ninja candidate, question mark. My Strive lore is not what it used to be. Chipp Zanuff. Very excited to be talking about Chipp. Even more excited to be having Chykka back on after a little bit of a hiatus. We haven't talked in a little while. Chykka, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Hello.
Hello, hello. Chykka is here to walk me through this character to teach me all the ins and outs of how to play Chipp. Um, if you've never seen the show before, if you're new to the Exceed community, as a matter of fact, because season 7 is right on the horizon, we're bound to get a handful of new people. Welcome. I hope you enjoy your stay. We're going to be teaching you all about this game. I'm not an expert. Chykka is. That's what he's here for. I'm just here to ask dumb questions. Um, Couple quick disclaimers before we get started. As always, number one, we talk about playing to win on this show. That's not the only way to play Exceed. You can play for fun, and I encourage you to play for fun. Um, if the lines of play that we're describing don't sound like fun to you, please don't play that way. Um, Play in a way that you find enjoyable, and don't let anybody tell you different. Number two, typically on this show, Chykka less than most of my guests, but some of us tend to be pretty prescriptive about strategy. You might hear Chykka say things like, pretty much always do this, pretty much never do that. Especially with a character who has not actually been physically released yet. But with every character, Exceed is not a solved game. We don't claim to know anything. To be clear, I don't claim to know anything. Chykka knows some things, and is pretty good at this game. But even his opinion is just an informed one, and these are the rules of Chykka's strategy with Chipp. They don't have to be your rules. If we've undervalued something, if you think we got something wrong, please let us know as we develop this character. Couple additional disclaimers to add to this episode. For one thing, this is a Strive character. Again, new character just released. If you are new, you are probably going to hear me and Chykka refer to a couple cards in over here in the normals by some names you might not be familiar with. You might hear us say assault, we mean slash. Uh, if we say spike, we mean dust, just cosmetic differences, just some differences between the seasons. Me and Chykka have been in the community for a little while now, so we say things a little differently. Final disclaimer for Chipp in particular here, it's going to be tough to avoid talking about. Chipp has kind of a reputation. He's kind of a notorious character, especially in this early Strive meta. He's uh, people get salty about Chipp. I will be brief and say that he has some notoriety as a very strong character. Exactly how strong the jury's still out on. Salt is fine. If I catch any of y'all shaming people for playing a character that they like, I'm gonna cook your goose. Or I'm gonna get somebody who's physically competent to come and cook your goose, like Reggie or somebody. He'll roast you. That's it. Really, don't be mean to people for playing a character they like. Be salty about Chipp if you need to be. We're not going to talk too much about that, but I wanted to address it up front. All that bookkeeping out of the way. Chykka, you are here for one thing and one thing only, and that's to tell me all about this weird ninja and his weird, like, gigantic bread roll of a belt. I don't know what his aesthetic is, but tell me a little bit about Chipp, Chykka.
All right. So I guess the main gameplay feature that a lot of that his play revolves around is his unique ability or his character ability, which is during strikes he has an after trigger that says you may advance or retreat one. And the main use of that, the main utility it gives you is that it lets you avoid a lot of counterattacks your opponent might throw your way when you try to hit them during a strike. You can just move out of the way, and you'll be wanting to look for opportunities to strike where you can essentially just poke the opponent for free or just deal like damage without without your opponent being able to hit you back. And yeah, do you have a question?
Oh no, please go ahead. I'll get to a question in just a second, though.
Okay. So an easy way to think about that could be like, for example, if we take a normal grass.
Let me move some stuff on the board in case we need a training dummy here. Here. We can run some board states for people who might not have the normals memorized yet.
So if Chipp plays grass, normally it trades with it would trade with the sweep because sweep hits that ranges 1 to 3.
So no matter where Chipp, without his ability, no matter where Chipp puts Ryu with grasp, he could put him one here, 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 here. Sweep would hit all of those positions. Here.
Yeah.
None of them help.
But with Chipp's
right.
Yeah, but with Chipp's ability, he can throw Ryu to range 3, and then using the after, he can move back 1, and then the sweep would miss.
Right. Okay.
So you want to be able to look out for or try to set up attacks which kind of let you do this kind of gameplay, which will annoy the hell out of your opponents.
Right.
But this is his attacks generally don't do that much damage. At least his specials don't. So a lot of the kind of strikes you'll be looking for is to kind of slowly chip away at the opponent's health, without getting hit back, and then accrue like resource advantages and win that way.
Okay. So in addition to I just did 3 damage and dodged a sweep, which is a high value card, I also just got gauge and you didn't, right?
Yeah.
So that even that basic exchange, that resource advantage and also, I mean, I can do this on defense as Chipp. This is not an initiated ability, so if my opponent just spent their turn trying to sweep me, I play Grasp defensively, throw them out, get gauge, do a bit of damage, and make them whiff and get nothing out of their turn. That's actually a huge loss for them, even though I only did 3 damage.
Yeah.
Okay. So the damage numbers are not necessarily going to tell the story in terms of how Chipp wins the game. It sounds like I'm going to be winning economically, winning positionally, and not necessarily winning by damage. Is that accurate?
I mean, you eventually want to be able to do enough damage to actually kill the opponent. So it's just that you kind of have to win maybe a bit more strikes than average, to eventually be able to win the game. I don't know if that fully addressed the question or not.
No, definitely. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm gonna be hitting a few more times, but not so many more times that I need to, like, it's not as big of an uphill battle as, a power value of 1, a power value of 1 would make it seem. I don't have to win 3 times as many strikes, just maybe a few more.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. So let me move
a lot of that is because Chipp has access to normals, and when he hits with normals, he does do the same amount of damage that most other characters do when they hit with normals.
Right. Sweep is still sweep. It doesn't actually change that.
Yeah. So a lot of in a sense, his specials having lower damage numbers could be a little bit deceptive in terms of how much damage he needs to do, but overall they mostly do less damage, or do damage on the lower end. So it depends on how many strikes you win off of off of either playing your specials and strikes, but then if you can also boost your specials and then hit with your normals. So if you can use the boost on your specials to hit with normals that just win the strike really cleanly, then you don't have to worry so much about your kit having less damage, I guess.
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay. And before we move on to the kit itself, a couple more questions about the ability here. So for one thing, after effects that let you dodge only really do much if you're going first, right? Like if I do get outsped, if I, like, for example, if I play a focus is a great defensive card, but for Chipp, a grasp is a great defensive card because it lets me dodge some things that other people wouldn't be able to dodge. I can't really expect to be doing that with my copy of focus because it's so slow that the after effect is going to go off after my opponent's attack has already occurred. So is part of the game plan that Chipp has is to just use his, I guess it makes sense, he's like a ninja, use his fast on curve, above curve stuff to just zip out of the way by a tiny bit and kind of like maintain the couple of positions where I'll be able to do that?
So Chipp does have a lot of speed boosts, which does okay. Well, let's see. He has 2+1 speed boosts, which I guess typically people like to think of that as not that great defensively, but I guess it depends on your
Right.
playstyle. Like some players might be fine just boosting +1 speed, and even though that's kind of the same advantage you would get.
Right.
In one sense, it's kind of the same advantage you would get from just initiating a strike. It kind of puts the onus on your opponent if they want to put pressure on you, it puts onus on them to do it, I guess.
Right.
Um, and then, but yeah, but like having speed boost lets him like play attacks that are faster, which would create more scenarios where he could just dodge out of the way with the after effects.
Okay. And as we get,
Um,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, but even though like slower attacks don't, if they're slower than the opponent, even if you don't dodge their attack, you still get the after movement, and I think that ties into just the other aspect of how his ability can be useful, which is that it essentially sets you up to be in a good position the next turn to um, either initiate a strike of your own that you want, or to be prepared defensively to deal with what your opponent might want to do.
Okay. So really then, and especially because focus is not going to get stunned by anything, short of a dust or a very high investment attack from my opponent. I can kind of read focus as uh, you cannot be pushed or pulled after draw one and advance or retreat one. Like that's
Yeah, exactly.
probably going to happen, and they can't do much to stop it. So if I'm here
Yeah,
and I've got a cross in my hand or something, or where's my DP? I've got Beta Blade in my hand.
yeah,
I hit with the focus. I'm feeling good about that. I back up one as part of the after effect, and now I'm in a perfect position to threaten my Beta Blade or on my turn, or boost something while having that defensive option. So I've got a lot of flexibility even among my slows.
yes, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. That makes sense. Um, is there any value in I see like I mean you see this sometimes with like if you have a boost that gives you larger after movement than this. Does Chipp get very much value out of things like if we're like over here or something? If we're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we're like I don't know, if we're like here or something, and my opponent is playing a projectile, pretend it's not Ryu, playing a projectile with a slightly small, narrow range band. Does Chipp get a lot of value out of just like grasping and then moving as kind of a dodge, sort of the way that like Propeller Knight does with Swoop, where he just kind of zips out of the way, or is Advance or Retreat one too small a step to really be able to do much of that?
No, I think you can do like you can definitely do things like that. I mean, of course, that I think that depends more on how wide your opponent's range bands are, and typically characters that have very good hit confirm through wide range bands on their attacks they have favorable tools against Chipp because it makes it harder for him to either hit you and dodge out of the way, or just simply dodge out of the way with like a grasp, or even when the grasp doesn't hit you. Um, so it really, I think it depends more on how tight or how awkward your opponent's attacks are. Like the more awkward they are, or the tighter the range bands are, the easier and the more frequently Chipp can just play something fast and move out of the way, even if he doesn't hit the opponent.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. So I've got a couple different use cases for this ability. It's for dodging.
Yeah,
It's for dodging with offense. It's for positioning for my next turn, or positioning to get out of my opponent's threat bands. And it can also be used as sort of an empty strike, just zip out, not even worried about hitting necessarily, just having a little bit of movement and spacing on my turn. But that last use case requires sort of a specific opponent. Not
yeah.
everybody is
Uh,
susceptible to that.
I think most of the time you wouldn't really initiate strikes just for the sake of trying to
Hmm.
whiff get your opponent to whiff unless they have a bunch of boosts. Unless they have like a boost up and you want to essentially poor man's tech, by initiating a strike. Or if you have this card, if you play this attack, which has an after that lets you return it to your hands, so you don't lose card advantage basically from striking and moving with it.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you get your after to move,
Yeah.
and then your other after returns it back to your hand anyway, so you could conceivably do that again. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, you can.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this also has the option to gain advantage on after. So if you wanted to, I mean, this is like a really. I think this is more of a niche tech or a niche option than something that you want to focus your game plan around. But something that you could do if the situation calls for it is to just strike with this and then move to a different space with the advantage, and then do something you want to do in that space. Kind of like a weird quick step, I guess.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a quick step during a strike, but it comes back to your hand. That I get you.
Well, you choose if you gain advantage or return this to your hand.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so this is not both. It's just either one of the two.
Gotcha. Okay. And then again, before we get into the actual attacks, Chipp also has an exceed mode, which it's the same ability, but also you have when you cancel, you may draw one. So 2 gauge exceed cost. How frequently do you find yourself going for this? What is sort of the value of Chipp's exceed mode? Is this like an every game thing? Is this just a some matchups thing? What do you think about it?
I think it depends on how you gauge the pace of the game to go, and how useful and how necessary your ultras are going to be.
Okay.
Yeah. Generally, I think generally, if you feel like especially if if Sansiruga is going to be a really useful ultra to play in this matchup, then you might want to keep a lot of gauge so that you have the most flexibility in terms of how much you want to spend to use it.
Right.
But if you're able to get that, get like 2 or 3 gauge early, and you anticipate you'll be playing a high tempo game with boosts, where you'll be canceling a lot, then I guess that's the case where you would consider exceeding.
Okay.
But I think it's more of a player preference thing. If they just want to be drawing, if you're a player that wants to draw a lot of cards and just cancel a lot, then you might like the exceed mode more. But if your game plan revolves more around like being able to threaten and play the ultra, or especially both ultras, then you might be a little bit more reticent to prioritize exceeding.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So it's and because it's a 2 gauge exceed and the ultras, although Zensairuga does have a lot of gauge baked into its before cost, it might not necessarily be an either or, maybe, because Chipp is probably hitting a lot. He's probably not hitting for a ton. If you have more strikes going on per game, you might have a fair amount of gauge. But between your cancels, your ultras, and your exceed, even Chipp's gauge generation might be stretched kind of thin, it seems like.
It depends on if you think you'll like if you want to cancel a lot, I guess, or if you think you'll want to spend a lot spend a lot of gauge playing Zansiruga or just be playing the ultras often, then it could be a bit thin. I think it depends on matchup probably.
Okay.
I think in some games the gauge economy feels tighter, in other games it feels more generous. Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm going to exceed, probably do it early to get the most value out of it. Do it if I'm anticipating or if I want to push the pace of the game to what my opponent can't deal with by refunding my cancels and keeping my ammo live. But I also have strong ultras that I can be going for. The cancels also use gauge. So I have some economic decisions to make as Chipp. Ballpark percentage wise, how often do you personally find yourself exceeding as Chipp?
I guess there's one further thing I should add, which is that I guess if you are swimming engaged in a game and you feel like you have enough gauge to play the ultra and exceed, and you can kind of do it, I guess, to kind of secure your late game economy. Like if once you have enough gauge you can essentially exceed without turning your ultra offline.
Right.
Then yeah, and you think you'll be getting a lot out of the draw, then that's something to consider as well. But
Okay.
I think that's less.
You would exceed as an investment rather than as
Yeah, yeah,
an
exactly.
immediate payout that you need right away. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But how often, like, so the question I asked was like just ballpark percentage wise, how frequently do you find yourself exceeding?
Um, I don't think I've exceeded that much in recent games, but I think further back, there was a period of time when it exceeded more. Um, so it's hard for me to answer that question.
Yeah, no problem. And like you said, it can be play style, it can be matchup specific. There's a lot of factors to consider. But I guess my point is this isn't a situation like Gold Lewis, who I just did a lesson on with Rose, who like he wants to exceed every game,
Yeah.
or Ryu, who basically never wants to exceed. Chip is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I would say that. Maybe. I mean, I feel like if I just looked at data from my most recent games, it's probably closer to Ryu, but I think it ultimately has a lot to do with player preference because in the past I have exceeded more often, and also I've played against players who liked exceeding more often. So,
Okay,
yeah, it
that
depends on your kind of vision for how you want to play the character, I guess.
makes sense. Cool. Okay. Do we want to get into the specials and ultras?
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. So here we can leave Ryu on the board in case we need to. Any particular order you want to cover these? Is there a card that is most important to him, or do we want to just kind of go from left to right here?
Okay, we can talk about this card first. This is Alpha Blade. So this is like your main threat as a special because it's at range 3, it's above curve, and it does 4 damage when at like ranges 2 and 3, which is which is like where like which are two ranges where the attack hits at like maximum damage, right? Because
Right.
usually those are the ranges where you can move past your opponent and still hit them. Because at range 1, if you advance 3, you would miss, and then you can also play it at ranges 2 and 3 to hit the opponent for 1 damage. But that's only really good if you need to stun out like a projectile, or well, I mean, you would still dodge a projectile, but if you need to stun something out, I guess, then you can play that.
Right. So it's a defensive shape too because it is like in opening positions, for example, it's above curve. It wouldn't do a ton of damage, but if my opponent has like a really scary, I don't know of many fast dives that are really scary, but if they've got Tiger Shot or something, being able to just say no, I'm not going to deal with your Tiger Shot. I'm going to come in and hit you for 1 could be valuable as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it forces a gap closer, so even if like let's say Ryu wants to, or let's say you're playing Ken and Ken wants to play a fireball at range 6. Well, actually, yeah. So normally it hits like, if this was Ken and you only played a 4-speed fireball, the 4-speed Hadoken would cover ranges 3, 4, 5, 6, right?
Right.
But you can advance 3, and then with the after you can
With your
close 1.
after, you move 1.
Yeah,
So this actually gives you a lot of places you could end up afterward, based on where you start, based on where you
yeah,
walk with your character ability. You could, if you do it from here, I land here, do 4 damage, cross back up over them with my character ability, and now I've got the long side of the board again. I've got a lot
yeah,
of different places I can go with this. I could maintain range 2 if I wanted to. I could even, if I came in from here, maintain range 3, do it again or something with another copy. So lots of flexibility there.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think personally, I think the main use is you want to you want to play ranges 2 to do the maximum 4 damage. Partially because Chip likes all the damage you can get, but
Right.
also it's mainly that because like if you're doing 1 damage with it, it's kind of just like a tickle, and it doesn't really give you anything else, right? So just really, and then you kind of lose one of your main like range 3 threats, or range 2 and 3 threats if you play it elsewhere.
Right.
Um,
And it doesn't
so
even hit at range 1, right? It's like a 2 to
yeah,
5.
yeah,
consideration?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So this is like his. This is kind of like the big. It takes up a lot of his power budget, so to speak. In terms of threats that he can throw out.
And
Um,
are you typically initiating with this, or is this the kind of thing that because it is above curve at range 3, you're happy to defend with as well?
it's good to have defensively, but also it is in some cases, it is something you can initiate with, because like it's an above curve option. It does 4 damage. If you play it at range 2, even it like can dodge focus because you can events 1, 2, 3, um, and then use your after to retreat to range 3 and focus misses.
Right.
Um, yeah, so defensively, I think one of the main cards, like at range 1, you want to watch out for your opponent's focuses because then your grass loses the focus all the time. Like your grass never beats focus in range 1 because
You
you can't
you
dodge out of the way.
even Chipp can't get that far away.
Yeah, because you can't throw your opponent. When they play focus into grass, you can't you can't move them with you can't throw your opponent if they play focus.
Right.
So yeah, you're gonna lose focus. And then at range 2, if you're playing Alpha Blade, you want to see if they have sweep as an option because sweep covers the Alpha Blade, but focus doesn't.
Okay, so it's the other half of your weird fast that beat slows mix up option.
Yeah, well, they technically work at different ranges. So like at
Oh,
range
true,
1,
true. Yeah,
focus is what's good against Chip, and then
you're
at
not
range
grasping at range
2,
2. I get you.
yeah, at range 2, if you think the opponent, like if you're playing Alpha Blade, what you want to look out for is what you want to consider is whether or not your opponent has a sweep or sweep like to counter hit it.
That makes sense. Okay. It's interesting just looking at this card when you say that it's a lot of his power budget. Again, this might be because I just had the Gold Lewis lesson again. Like 4 damage is cool. 4 damage above curve is cool, but it does not. This card does not look that impressive until you start adding in like, oh, Chip can reposition afterward. He's got so much flexibility. Like there actually is a lot you can do with this. Um, so it's kind of a deceptive card. It seems like.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess you can. I mean, I don't know if I ever saw it in that way, but I guess
That
I can kind of.
that might be because you're better at the game than me. So okay, so this is a card that my opponent needs to watch out for. Is it so important that I am reticent to boost it, or slow to boost it? Do I not want to EX it? Like, how important is it that I keep a copy of Alpha Blade live to deal with things?
Chip has a lot of speed boosts elsewhere. Like he has 2+1 speed boosts. He has like this +1 speed boost, this +1 speed boost. He has this +2 speed boost. So if you just need speed boosts, then like you have other options that you can consider instead of this. But of course, if you've already used these other cards up, and you still have Daijubo, Daijubu, you
You're
still have
so
this boost.
Chika, you're so much braver than me for even attempting the pronunciation.
Or I guess, maybe it's Daijobu. Okay.
So, but if you've already got speed coverage elsewhere, you can probably just save 2 copies of Alpha Blade. What is the benefit of this boost though? So we got cancelable +1, cancelable Swift, +1 power, +1 speed. That's cool. The opponent's attack has +3 power. That I don't want to get hit by Akuma Exceed Mode critical here. Like what is? Tell me a little bit about how to avoid things. How to avoid taking that +3 power.
Just go first and then stun the opponent or dodge the attack that they're gonna play in response. Make sure that you just have to, yeah, and make sure that they can't hit you back after you boost it and cancel it. I mean, I guess something you could do. I mean, is if to set up the mythical or the much talked about unbeatable spike is you can boost this and then either boost like this +2 speed, and then now you can hit a speed 6 spike, which against most in most situations, or in a lot of situations, is typically unbeatable.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether it's worth 2 gauge, an ultra boost, one of your best cards, and a spike for 6 damage? Yeah, 6 damage. That's another question. But at the very least, you can do that.
Yeah. Or if you want to hit maybe some breakpoints, like if you need your dive to stun out sweep, or stun out, yeah, if you need a dive to stun out sweep, for example, you could boost this, and you can also boost badass, and then play dive.
Sure. Okay.
It's a 7-power dive.
So because it's cancelable, you're not necessarily thinking about this in terms of, all right, it's my +1 speed, +1 power, and my character ability's dodging ability versus their +3 power. It's actually all those things I just said, plus whatever other cancelable boosts I want to put on it. And that could be quite a few to make this way, way less of a suicide mission than it might appear. Is this something that I kind of would prefer to do in the late game when more of my opponent's options are down, so I can control what they're throwing at me more? Or is it really like, is Chipp so dodgy and have so much positioning control that he can just do this kind of maybe not at will, but without that much fear, I guess I should say?
I mean, I don't think you want to boost this just like casually. I think you need to have a very good reason to boost this, because most of the time, if you're probably going to be canceling into either striking or playing other boosts, and canceling those boosts into striking. So if you're going to boost this, you want to make sure you do it in a position where you feel you need it to beat something or to play something that's unbeatable.
Okay.
Yeah, and also the attack is really good. So
that's the other thing, because I can imagine with cancels being as flexible as they are, it's actually probably not that difficult to get a hand composition that allows you to play something very, very strong with this boost. But also, this attack is great, so maybe just play the attack and boost if you have like a really high value setup to do.
Yeah.
Okay. I get you. So that's Alpha Blade. It seems ridiculous. Here, let's move our normals over here for now. Where to next? We do have we could follow the alphabet here. We could just learn about Beta Blade. We could learn about Gamma Blade.
We'll decide on one of these two later. Yeah.
Should we just go to Beta Blade next?
Yeah, let's go to Beta Blade.
Okay.
So Beta Blade is quote unquote a bad DP because it only does 1 damage.
Right.
And and also, like, I guess, a lot with Grasp, you can play it with the range 3 and dodge a lot of incoming attacks, but it's not quite the case with Beta Blade because it has a close 1, which makes it like a bit of a weird DP, I guess. But I guess on the other hand, that means that it's able to dodge certain projectiles more easily. But generally, it's kind of a card that doesn't really give you much, but it kind of is just like a resource builder and like a defensive option to like stuff out. You're like trying to slow your opponent's momentum down if they're like, if they try to play cross or they try to play spike. This covers both of those. And I think that's actually kind of unique amongst DPs, actually, because a lot of DPs, they close, they close 1 and they push 2,
and then push, sure, and then you lose to the spike anyway. I've played Spring Raid? Is that Noel's DP that does that? There's a couple like that. And obviously then afterwards I can order these triggers with my character ability. I could close in, wind up here. I could close in, wind up here.
Yeah.
I could
you can just close and not move afterwards.
Oh, it's a May. Yeah, it's a May also. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't even have to worry about that. Okay. So this is more valuable if my opponent has like Axe Kick or some really scary on curve offensive option.
Exactly. Yeah.
But even without that, the opportunity to nope out of certain parts of a mix-up or catch a cross or something is valuable. Good defensive option. Having a DP in your kit is never a bad thing. And with your character ability, you get a lot of positioning out of it.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like kind of half like an investment and half just like a kind of a stopgap measure almost. Like it because it doesn't do much damage, so it doesn't really like push your game plan forward directly, but it builds gauge. It lets you
Right.
draw a card, so it's kind of up to you to make up that like when you play it, it's up to you to make up the damage that you would have normally got from a regular DP, like the 2 extra damage you would have gotten from a regular DP, right?
Right.
Using the card that you drew. So it's like a tempo card rather than a kind of like a real threat.
Okay, that makes sense. Tempo disruption, I get that.
Yeah.
And then how about Shogun?
It's like if you want +1 speed, you boost it, and sometimes you might want to boost it along with some other speed boosts to make a +2 or +3 speed attack, like notably Diver Spike, and then it also has a hit effect. The opponent must discard a card, but I think that's more of kind of like an extra. It's like a bonus that you get. It's like a slight economic advantage that you got if you hit the opponent.
Right. It's tougher to quantify that than +1 speed is okay. So this is the second boost in a row that you've discussed as being like part of something else. And before we get, I'm taking a quick glance around his kit here as we have it spread out. Every single one of these, it looks like, is either cancelable or tells you to take another action on it. And Chipp makes a lot of gauge compared to other characters who might be canceling in bursts of 2 or maybe 3 on a big turn. How frequently is Chipp like how much of Chipp's gauge is going towards long cancel chains like this?
I think that I think like yeah, I think part of it kind of depends on the player, depends on the matchup. But definitely he has a lot of ways to play long cancel chains. And he definitely can be like a very combo like heavy feeling character where he just does a bunch of cancel combos and plays something unbeatable if you give him the opportunity to build up that gauge.
Right. Okay. And the stuff that we tend to be talking about for that is that speed 6 spike to close out a game, or like you said, a mid speed, a dive to win combat for mostly for free. So I don't have like with other characters, when we were talking about Chun-Li, for example, a while ago, Chykka, there were a couple of boosts and attacks that went incredibly well together. With Chipp, I kind of have so much flexibility that it seems like I can like build my own combo out of a lot of different tools, and I don't necessarily need like a canonical route. Is that accurate?
I guess I think for these +1 speed boosts, that's the case. Or at least this particular +1 speed boost, because it doesn't have any drawbacks attached. It just doesn't have a whole lot of upside like by itself either.
Right.
So it's yeah. So you kind of you use it to like to fill. So essentially like it's essentially you use it in conjunction with other speed boosts typically, or I guess if you just want to play an on-curve dive, you can boost and cancel and play an on-curve dive.
Right. Yeah. Even in certain positions, at least, even outside of a big long cancel chain, cancelable +1 speed is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like a solid, just like a kind of a solid +1 speed boost that like doesn't offer that much more than that, but yeah, if you needed to offer more, then you can cancel into something
cancel
else.
it into a whole bunch of other things. Sure.
Yeah.
I get you. All right. So that's 2 of our 3 blades here. How about Gamma Blade?
All right. So Gamma Blade has kind of two use cases, primary use cases. One of them is just as a fireball. So if we have range 5 and your opponent doesn't have any options, if you're not Ryu with the Hodoken or they ran out of Hodokens, if you can find yourself in range 5, you can just play it and deal a free 3 damage and then gain advantage, and then also like decide if you basically where you want to end up the next turn and to do something else.
Right, because maybe they swept, right? So maybe you don't want to run in all the way. You wouldn't use the May on this.
Yeah. So this is a good if you have the situation for it, it's like a nice aggressive option to like essentially start a combo or extend a combo. It's good for like sequencing into a follow-up attack. Like
okay.
And I would say the other use case is when you're at range 1, you can play Gamma Blade, and it acts as a mid speed that essentially lets you dodge the slow attacks your opponent might throw out.
Okay, it's kind of like diving over somebody, but you need a little bit more room on the other side to get out of the way.
Yeah. So basically, and also it hits the sweep and focus, then and then you can advance 3, and then you'll be at range 3, but then because of your character ability, you can retreat to range 4.
Right.
And dodge the sweep. So if you're cornered and you think your opponent's gonna play focus or sweep, you can just play this and then dodge to focus or sweep.
Get out of there, right? So even though this is compared to the grasp we were talking about earlier to dodge stuff, this is 3 speed, that's 7 speed. In terms of what you're actually trying to dodge, 3 speed might be enough.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And also, like, not to overemphasize the point here, but for people who are not quite used to how like trigger stacking and stuff works, the combination of my character ability and Gamma Blade gives me a lot of positioning flexibility. If we're back in this position that we were talking about before, I could do May advance 3, wind up here. May advance 3, and also use my character ability to get to here, or get to here. Don't advance 3, just use my character ability to get to here. Don't advance 3, just use my character ability to get to here. I or not move at all. I can cover like almost like every space, basically, between here and my opponent and a little bit behind me, and just pick the position I want with Gamma Blade and my character ability.
Yeah.
Okay. So, wind up wherever you want to wind up by stacking your trigger abilities. Or, I'm sorry, stacking your after triggers to dodge whatever you need to dodge and get to where you need to get to. That kind of speaks to what you were saying a second ago about it being a combo starter. If I've got sweep in my hand, my opponent's cornered. Awesome, I'll get to here and sweep them with my advantage. If I have slash in my hand, cool, I'll get to here and then slash him, get advantage that way, and continue the combo from there. So just a lot of flexibility to do what I need to do with my hand.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if you want to play the unbeatable spike, you can and you're here, you can advance 3 and then go here and then just boost 2 plus boost a bunch of speed and then strike, and then you even built the gauge off of this, so it's probably a little bit easier.
Right. Yeah. So it seems like with what we're talking about here, gauge is coming in fast because I'm hitting a lot. I'm doing a lot of little tickles here and there. But gauge is going fast too. I'm spending it pretty rapidly to do all of these cancel chains and stuff. So I do need to be getting gauge where I can with things like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think how quickly you're spending gauge really depends on the player. I think ideally you might not you probably want to try to win strikes without having to cancel, but oftentimes you'll find yourself feeling like you need to cancel to to beat the things that your opponents are setting up, or if you decide to exceed, then your the gauge cost that you spend for canceling, you essentially get a rebate through the card draw, and that gives its own kind of momentum.
Right. It's like you're trade. I mean, yeah, you're trading one resource from your gauge, and now you'll never have that 2 gauge again to cancel with. But now you'll have more cards in hand to cancel with, and canceling requires both. So you're making your cancels more expensive in one way by exceeding, but cheaper in another way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, yeah, and then the cards you draw off of a cancel, you can use them immediately. So that's nice if you just kind of are like looking for the one piece of the puzzle you need to do what you want to do. Sometimes, if you're exceeded, then you know using cancels to get to find your out is the way to go. But that's kind of up to each player's discretion to see if they want to push their luck a bit, or if they need to kind of push their luck a bit, or um, it's up to the player to decide
Okay.
how often they want to cancel, I guess.
That makes sense.
Because Chipp can play pretty defensively without cancels just by trying to, you know, utilize his speed to defend with, and utilize focus and sweep, and then decide later on how he wants to spend gauge, or if he wants, if he want how later on if he wants to do a big cancel chain into something, or if he wants to play the ultras. Um,
Right. I mean, it,
yeah,
it occurs to me that what you're talking about is some difficult and maybe some complicated decision making, but these are good problems to have, right? Like having lots of gauge and lots of places to spend gauge might make you a tricky character to play optimally, but
yeah,
having lots of options is good, and having lots of good things to do with your gauge is good. So, this is definitely not something we should be complaining about. Um, how about sushi? Incredible named boost, by the way.
this is the funny boosts because that lets you retreat too. But typically you, and then it has a before effect, which is if you're at the edge of the arena, advance 3. So typically if you're boosting this, you probably want to do it so that it puts you in the corner, so that you have the very flexible advance 3 to essentially hit above curve with like a with either a grasp, or like hit a, or just hit like a dive from like really far range.
All the way across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So and that advance 3 depends on what you. I mean, you could do it on grasp, right? You could drop a grasp from here, and now all of a sudden you've got an unbelievably uh flexible. Basically, like it's a super fast dive now. Now your sweep
yeah,
can cover a ton of distance at once, and you can do it from outside of spike range. So this edge of the arena advance 3 can be pretty strong.
yeah.
Any downsides to it? I noticed that it's not a May effect.
Yeah, so you do want to make sure that you can hit. Well, generally you generally want to make sure you can hit with the attack that you're going to play with the advance 3. I guess one way to, I guess one way to kind of ignore it is if you're playing something like like slash, which has its own before trigger, and you know like if there you can technically, I guess, option select if you don't want to do the advance 3 by just closing 2 first. And then you're out of
And
the.
now you're no longer at the Okay, so it's
Yeah,
not. It doesn't say if you were at the edge of the arena before advance 3. The the condition is in the before effect. So if you're no longer there, you don't have to do it anymore.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably not going to come up very often where that's relevant, but there might be there might be a few situations, like niche situations, where it might matter. I guess maybe like with dive, it might matter where you don't want to. Maybe sometimes you don't want to advance 3 and then advance 3, and then in which case you can just simply do the advance 3 and dive,
Right.
and then not have to advance 3 again. Like if your opponent moved to range 3, I guess. You don't want to advance 3 and advance 3. You just want
And
to
then
advance
advance
3
3 past
once.
them. Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Um so the other question I have would be like with these boosts that we've discussed so far on his specials, it's pretty clear that canceling is very strong for them. Like +1 speed if you don't cancel it is like fine, but as you said, it's kind of like just winning speed ties when your opponent initiates.
Yeah.
If you don't cancel this, you better have a pretty good idea that you're dodging something that your opponent's going to be playing.
I
Is
think
there any?
I guess for Shogun, it depends. I think for certain playstyles, if sometimes you're okay. Sometimes you might feel fine just boosting +1 speed and passing turn. But Even though like I think some players think that that's not worth it, but
Okay.
yeah, if you just kind of want to just cycle your deck and make it a little bit harder for your opponent to strike into you with the +1 speed, that is something that is valid, I guess, or something a player can consider.
Okay. So maybe don't cancel this. Probably cancel this.
Yes. Yeah.
What about sushi? Is there any particular value canceling this versus not canceling this?
I think that depends on. It really depends on the game state. If you want to, if you think like now is the time to strike, then like if your opponent is, let's see, like if your opponent's here, then if you want to play dive, then maybe you want to boost this cancel and then just play the dive before they have a chance to
Before they
kind of
move,
move.
sure.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so this one then, in terms of if you make a tier list of how often you're canceling, sushi is closer to Shogun than it is to Daijobu.
Yeah,
You're,
I would. Yeah.
like this one feels like a sometimes cancel, sometimes don't. This is a sometimes cancel, sometimes don't. This is a never not cancel. It sounds like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I get you.
But yeah, so I think initially I might have misheard like which boost referred to which boost name referred to which boost.
Right. Yeah. Additional disclaimer from the start of the episode: none of us speak any more Japanese than Chipp does. Actually, Chykka, maybe you do. I do not speak any more Japanese than Chipp does.
I don't. You heard how unfamiliar with the pronunciation of this.
That's fair.
This boost I was, right.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. All right, so that's our Blade trio. We got a couple more specials to cover here. Excuse me. How about Resho?
All right. So this is okay. So this attack is generally pretty situational. There is there's like the one niche tech that or situational tech I guess I described earlier, which is that you could use it as a poor man's tech at certain ranges to essentially get rid of an opponent's boost without losing any card advantage. You could use it to essentially sort of do a poor man's quick step during a strike. But sometimes you can there are situations where you do play it on a range 2 to either if you're trying to call it spike, then it can dodge a spike by by moving to range 1, for example. Although in general, I guess playing spikes against Chipp is pretty risky because speed 3 isn't very high.
It's tough to hit the guy, yeah, and it's got a limited range band.
Yeah. But yeah, if you play it at range 2, especially if you find a way to play it on curve, which isn't very hard because he has a lot of speed boosts, then you get draw 2, and then you can gain advantage, which is pretty good because then you can kind of keep your. It gives you a lot of momentum in terms of being able to draw new cards and then be able to play them immediately with advantage, and you can also reposition. And the reposition also lets you dodge focus. So, in terms of getting counter hit, a lot of the time, you're mainly worried about a sweep or sweep like. But despite all of that, I think this attack is generally pretty situational because it doesn't really do that much damage even when it hits. So the more common use of this is just boosting it because it gives you so much. It gives you so much neutral control because of the +1 speed and mainly because of the advance 2 because it lets you. You're spending 1 card and your advance 2 and you get a bunch of other benefits on top of it. Or you can use it to get out of the corner. You can cancel. You can use the reposition and get +1 speed and then cancel into either more speed or just something else
into whatever you want, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a very very potent boost because it's so flexible and gives him so much like bits of value in different places. Because it just it gives you movement, speed, and card draw at the same time, right? So it just feels like it gives you a lot of value.
Okay, and so most of the time when I'm playing this,
Oh, and a lot of time,
it's probably gonna be as the boost.
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And even I mean, Resho gives you some economic advantage too, but Harakiri actually probably gives you more because you're still drawing for end of turn, and
Yeah.
you could cancel if you want to be much more flexible with that resource than you would if you were striking.
Yeah,
Although
exactly.
advantage could let you draw cards as well, so maybe
Yeah.
it's a wash there. But all right, I get you. Okay, and then how about Genrozan?
All right. The attack is probably his most niche out of the five, because it's really slow, has no guard, and it only does 3 power. It only has 3 power, so it only does 3 damage. And uh, a lot of like you. I feel like you never really want to play this as an attack. You only play it as an attack if you feel like you need to for a specific reason, such as if your opponent just has some setup surround like where you don't want to get hit. Like they have a setup going where they're threatening like a slow attack that's speed 2 or lower, and sometimes you might want to play this as a mix up to defuse the situation, or just or you just want to play the mix up, I guess. But even then, the reward's not very high because I mean it has ignore guard, so it does beat sweep, and it does usually win against single focus, but you're not really doing much damage.
And
The
also,
main
you have a lot of other ways to beat sweep and focus just by repositioning.
Yeah. I mean, I guess generally, like because usually like this kind of serves similar role uh to Genruzan, but there's probably more upside to it. It's also faster, I guess. You also gain advantage.
Right.
Unless of course, like I mean, I guess there might be positions where this like Common Blade doesn't dodge focus or sweep. But I mean, if all you're trying to do is dodge and focus a sweep, it's kind of like it's not something you necessarily want to play. It's like you feel the need to play it, I guess, like in very specific situations. But
Right.
for the most part, you can probably ignore this as an attack, especially because the boost is really good,
Okay.
and really annoying for your opponent to deal with. Sukiyaki, your attacks at range 1 do not hit you after add this to your gauge. What this means is basically if you are at range 1, if you play an attack that's slower than your opponent's, then unless they move out of range 1 with their attack, they're probably not going to be able to hit you.
Right.
Um, yeah, so if they initiate into you at range 1, and you play focus, then most attacks they play will probably miss, unless they're yeah. I mean, their own focuses and sweeps and grasp will miss. So you just have to worry about attacks where they're moving out of range 1 to hit you.
Right. And there's not a ton. Like there's plenty of attacks from range 2 or range 3 that move into range 1 to hit.
Yeah,
Slash is
yeah,
one. Everybody has specials that do that. Sure, you can, as a matter of fact, is one of those. But there's not a lot of cards in all of Exceed. In all the lessons I've done, I think I remember like Fight has retreating bolts where he backs up from range 1. And there's not a lot of those that retreat and hit from range 1. So this if you're at range 1, this seems like as long as you can go slow, this seems like a pretty safe card to play. Um is it something that you would want to capitalize on right away with a cancel for the most part, or is this something that you can just sort of leave on the field and make your opponent deal with?
I think generally you can leave on the field. There are certain combos which like you can definitely choose to either cancel or leave in the field, which is um if you can boost this and then combine it with Gamma Blade, right? Um and usually that means that if they can't if they don't have an attack where they can retreat, then you can just strike with Gamma Blade, and then you'll essentially dodge all the fast attacks that try to hit you at range 1, and then you'll dodge all the slow attacks because you'll move out of the way.
Right.
So this is definitely a strong combo. You can this is definitely an attack you can play with this boost for a very potent combo. And kind of similarly, you can do it with cross where if you have this boost, then their grass is not going to hit you, and a lot of their speed 7s that hit a range 1 aren't going to hit you, and then you can then move into a range of cross where you're able to dodge their counterattack.
Oh, whoa, didn't think about that. All right, so again, after triggering, super useful here on cross. I can use my character ability to get out of the corner and then retreat 3 to make space that way. All right, that is something I did not think about. So
and the nice thing about canceling with this boost is that since it's essentially it's a key charge, because it has after add to your gauge, you don't really you kind of get the gauge that you used back, right? From canceling on top of the attack that you're hit with.
right. If they do manage to underspeed you, right? You know, you play sweep, they play focus with this. It goes to your gauge. There's the reminder text on here. It is no longer in play, just to be explicit. This goes to your gauge. Awesome, I got gauge. Oh no, I don't have my range 1 dodge anymore. If I didn't move from my after effect, my character ability after effect, to somehow get out of the way of whatever they were throwing, I do get hit then.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. All right, so yeah, super, super powerful boost. It's interesting to me that, you know, with other characters, when you mention like a specific combo that's very powerful, it's like, yeah, these two things together do 8 damage. With Chipp, these two things together do 3. But it's guaranteed 3, and it gets you gauge and makes you dodge, and that's what you need for your game plan. So for Chipp combos, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and so I think maybe one of the things you might want to think about to decide if you want to cancel this boost is if your opponent has their own action compression that can get them out of the situation of having to deal with this boost, or if you really want to get this position immediately,
Sure.
to get a new position immediately.
So my opponent's Ryu, he has quick step or lightning reflexes. Retreat 1, take another action, donkey kick. Now all of a sudden my setup is much less scary than it was.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. So those are the specials. You know, and I feel like powerful attack, pretty good boost when used as part of a combo. DPs are important. Good boost as part of a combo. Good boost to leave on the field. Not an overwhelmingly cool attack. Very cool boost sometimes. Gives you a lot of neutral control. Really, really cool positional attack. Potentially very strong, very flexible neutral boost. And then pretty niche attack. Really, really scary boost.
Mm-hmm.
How am I doing on the pop quiz so far, Chykka?
You're doing good. You're doing good.
All right, cool. I can remember things that were said to me over an hour ago. Awesome. That's how you can tell I'm learning. Do we want to cover ultras?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we can go with the cheaper one first. So Banke Messai. It's just generally an all-around very solid dive-like ultra. I think maybe even a little bit underestimated. Because so ideally you want to play this in situations where you can come in and then push your opponent out of the way and then dodge their slow. So there are a lot of ways and opportunities to make this a relatively safe attack. And it also lets you draw 2 cards afterwards. So you're getting pretty good value from hitting the attack.
And it's only 1 gauge, and the gauge that I'm spending is now replaced by something that's worth 2 force in gauge.
Yeah. So you're essentially spending 1 gauge to get you have a card in gauge now that's worth 2 force, but also you can also just think of it as like the gauge. You draw 2 cards, and that basically more than refunds the gauge costs for the most part.
Right.
And it does 5 damage, which is a lot more than most of his other attacks.
That's the most damage we've seen this whole time, even including Alpha Blade's +3 power. Okay, so this is a very strong range 4 option. Lets me maintain range 4. Lets me keep range 2 if I want to. Keep range 3 if I want to. Economic value, lot of upside for a 1 gauge ultra.
Yeah, and it also works with the suits, of course. If you've played at range 1.
Oh, sure,
Because,
yeah. You push him out.
Yeah.
You don't even need to have the positioning. Okay.
Yeah, it just doesn't work against focus, but it works against sweep. So
Okay.
But I mean, you can't win against everything. Or I mean, I guess in some cases Chipp can, but
yeah, maybe you can sometimes, but that's. I mean, well, oh no, I see what you mean. Yeah, because then this would go away. You wouldn't have the range 1 dodge anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it covers. Yeah, it covers a lot of this attack. It gives it's another it's another scenario. This boost existing gives another scenario where you can play where you could play this attack and have it be relatively reliable. You won't dodge the focus, but it essentially lets you dodge the sweep and dodge all the faster attacks at range 1. So yeah, it loses the focus still, but like that's the biggest. That's the biggest.
Yeah, there's a lot.
That's the worst outcome you can get, but that's still.
There's a lot of
terrible.
There's a lot of good cards in Exceed that still lose to focus. That's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how about play the hero? Draw 3, take another action. What? Isn't this just a cancelable boost? That's not a. Why is it?
Yeah.
Why does it look like this? I kind of like it. I kind of like that it's take another action instead of cancelable. But because you don't need to spend gauge. Duh. That's literally not. It's literally not the same mechanic. Gearface. Come on. Okay. Draw 3, take another action. How do we evaluate this?
I think I know a lot of people like to just draw 3, take another action. I think it's if you need to draw cards to to find an answer to a situation, then I think you should boost this. But I guess if you just like drawing cards in general, like it's like a better CC and take another action. There's not too much to say about the boost except that if you want to draw cards, then you can just boost it.
Right, but also like if you wanted to draw cards, you could play Banki Masai as an attack. You draw a couple that way too. I guess then you don't take another action afterward. How is Chipp's economy? We've seen quite a bit of card draw all over his kit anyway, but with how many cancelable boosts he has, are you running through those resources fast enough that you might really need that draw 3 sometimes?
Wait, so this is your question whether or not you still need to draw more cards in order to find the tools that you're looking for?
Yeah, so basically I could see a situation where, rushdown Chipp, if you play Chipp as a rushdown character and you are drawing cards to make EXs and to just get through your options as quick as you can to get the good stuff, but to get what you need. But because Chipp has a lot of card draw throughout the rest of his kit, how frequently does he need draw 3, take another action?
It probably depends on the player. And how comfortable a player is with playing a little bit more slowly or not. Or how quickly they want to be able to get to their combos. Because I think if you just want to play combos with Chipp, then draw 3, take an action is definitely very strong.
Right.
Because it just lets you you get to your combo pieces faster, right?
So strong attack, strong boost. Then for you personally, how frequently do you find yourself playing one over the other, or is it a pretty even split?
I think I tend to play the attack more often than I play the boost. But that's just me. just because I kind of see the boost as a if I need if I need to draw something in a pinch, then I'll boost it. Otherwise, I could be doing something else.
Right. So you're using play the hero as a I need an answer tool, not necessarily
Yeah.
as like a hand reload or a or like just like force for the rest of my cancels that I'm going to be doing. You're using it as like I'm in trouble and I need to get out of trouble right now and I don't have the card to do it.
Yeah, or I guess if I really want to play, an unbeatable spike this turn, or some unbeatable some unbeatable cancel chain, and I really want to draw those pieces right now, then I'll do it.
Right.
Yeah, if I feel like I need need certain if I basically if I'm searching for like particular cards like that I want to be able to play this turn, then I'll boost it. But otherwise, I feel like I typically tend to feel I can just be doing something else.
Okay. That makes sense. And the reason that you need to do that this turn is because you've got your opponent in a good position and you're ready to cash out with like you've got 2/3 of your combo pieces. You need one more. You might draw it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. And if you don't, then hey, you have some things that can combo into the ultra attack instead. So that works for you too. And how about, excuse me, our final ultra here, Zansai Ruga.
Yeah, so it's 9
A
speed attack.
nine speed, huh? That's too fast. I'm Chykka. I'm just gonna say that's too many. That's too many speed.
It's quite the ninja move.
Spend up to 4 gauge for each gauge spent +1 power and advance 3. Okay. So you don't have to spend any. And then it's just a 2 gauge ultra that hits for 2, but it's 9 speed. So it's what are you trying to outspeed? Like EX grasp? Like what are you trying to outspeed with 9 speed here on defense?
You just have to it takes off some of your mental stack. You don't have to worry as much about your opponent being able to outspeed this, I guess.
That's true, I guess. They really, really, really short of like doesn't Bang have like an 8 or 9 speed ultra? Like you can EX that or something and you're or like that one Leo card that like multiplies its wild swing speed bonus by 10. Otherwise, this card is going first.
Yeah, so because of how fast it is and the way its hit confirm works, you generally want to have like 2 to 3 gauge around in order to threaten this like as a defensive option where you can be at ranges like at a bunch of different ranges and not be worried about not be worried about like a lot of threats the opponent has by simply this existing. And it doesn't do that much damage. And so, generally speaking, if you're spending more than 1 gauge on the before, it's definitely something you really want to seriously consider if you really need the damage or not. And it's a very expensive source of damage, but sometimes and often can be worth it.
9 speed damage to close a game out is okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to. I mean, like and it's definitely a lot of gauge to commit. So you do want to be like careful or thoughtful about like how much gauge you really want to spend to get extra damage. And maybe sometimes if you're really far out and you need to dodge something, then you happen to have 4 gauge, then
right.
You can do it twice. But it is pretty expensive to use more than 1 gauge to. Yeah, or I mean, even 3 gauge can be a bit expensive, I guess. But that's
because it's already a 2 gauge ultra. So when you're saying 2 gauge or 3 gauge, that's just adding on top of what's already there. It could go up to 6 gauge altogether, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So where in if you're trying to hit with this, and because the things that you're describing are mostly about dodges, it seems like, but in practice, how would this work? So I'm at range 2. I play it. Now I have an option select. I can spend as much as I need. If I do it will always maintain range 2 if I start at range 2, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And then I can use, after it goes off, I can use my character ability to back up 1 or advance 1. But
Yeah.
if I'm already hitting, I can't do like this attack doesn't the way that consecutive advances work and exceed is not all right. I advance 3, and then I advance 3, and then I advance 3. That's not like I'm always
Yeah.
going back towards my opponent, right?
Yeah. So it's each instance of advance happens separately. So you
Right.
don't. It's not you. Yeah. It's not like you don't just add up the number and make it advance 9. It's advance 3.
Right. I don't advance
One at a
over
time.
to I don't advance over to the next exceed board over here. I stay around my opponent when I do it. So when I'm hitting with this, I could play it all the way out here, and now I've got, add some more gauge on top of it, and now I'm hitting still. But it doesn't seem like there's really any blind spots with it, if as long as I have enough gauge to play it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But mostly the concern then is not about positioning necessarily, it's more about, is it worth the gauge cost, right?
Yeah. I guess there is one thing to consider with regards to whether it hits or not is sometimes you might want enough power to break certain breakpoints, and that can make this. And if you're playing at a range 3 or range 1, you have to you do want to make sure that your math comes out right, so that you can spend enough gauge to get enough power that and end up at the right range to hit your opponent back. Yeah.
And the most damage I could do with this is 6, right? For 6 gauge.
By itself, yeah.
Right.
You can play an EX, you can boost its rock, and then potentially do more than 6.
Right.
Um,
So in practical terms, in terms of how much gauge I'm willing to spend on something like this, like, my opponent plays a focus, I'm probably not breaking that with this anytime soon. But if they play a donkey kick, if they play a 4-guard thing, I might be willing to spend a couple more gauge to break it if I can't dodge it by getting to 3 or something, and odds are I can, because I'm Chipp and I can move. So I probably don't need to spend very much.
You could, yeah. I mean, you could go to range 3 to dodge it. It's just that if you go to range 3 to dodge it, you're not hitting the back. So
Right.
it's a different kind of trade.
Right, but if I am at range 2 and I play it, I could spend 0 gauge other than the cost of the ultra,
Yes.
and then just back up on it and dodge it that way.
Yeah.
So in terms of what I'm actually using it to dodge, there's some redundancy with my character ability. I can probably spend less than I think I need to, even if I'm trying to break a breakpoint, unless it's like a really wide range band move.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. And then how about this? For clarification for people at home, the most of the ultra boosts in season 7 are named after songs from Guilty Gear. This one happens to be called Sucka Sage, which is a very funny name. Tell me about Sucka Sage, Chykka.
So +2 speed, the opponent's attack has +3 power. So you definitely want to make sure that whatever you're striking with, has as low of a chance of getting hit back as possible, so that the opponent, and you want to try to avoid getting punished by your opponent by giving them +3 power.
So it's pretty much, in a lot of ways, it's pretty much the same boost as this one, but with more speed to make it a little bit easier to dodge things.
Yeah, more speed, less power. Yeah.
Right.
So usually if you want to boost these, it's part of the way you play spike or sometimes dive. Dive can be blocked, but spike can't be blocked, right? So and you have a lot of speed. So if you really want to play the unbeatable 6 or 7 speed spike, then this is kind of on the road to getting there by boosting this.
Okay. And same question for the other ultra for this one. How frequently do you find yourself boosting this versus playing it?
I think it depends on the matchup. It depends on, like, for example, these ultra is just really good against zoners, because you're outspeeding every single fireball pretty much, and then closing the distance.
Right.
So this is like a really important card really important threat to have in zoner matchups. But even kind of in general, like it's a good threat in neutral to like defend against things your opponent can throw, like by playing something really above curve. But if you have these, if you have the setup for the spike, then you can just boost +2 speed and maybe another +1 speed and play spike, play like 6 speed spike, and that's often like five damage to opponent. That is hard for your opponent to get out of.
Yeah, five completely guaranteed damage with no counterattack is kind of an ultra anyway. So spending something to make an ultra out of it is pretty strong. Okay, so it sounds like the exceed mode is not always a consideration. Use it sometimes, don't use it other times. You frequently find yourself playing this this ultra. You don't always find yourself playing this ultra because this boost is quite strong. It kind of sounds like almost all of my gauge, and I'm going to be building a lot of it, can be spent on cancels fairly freely then. At least under the way that you're playing Chipp, a lot of your resources are going towards cancel chains.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think the option is there for you to do that. I think it ultimately comes down to how much gauge you envision spending, or being able to spend on this 9 speed ultra, 2 gauge 9 speed ultra.
So this is kind of an alternate gauge outlet. If you want it to be, I guess I'm wondering, like, if you spend all that gauge on this ultra, are you getting as much out of it as you would if you had been spending it on cancels? And from what you've been describing so far, it sounds like the cancels have the I guess like the better argument for being the focus of your gauge than this ultra does. But I just want to know if I'm kind of interpreting what you're saying right, or if there are times when this ultra is actually that important to you.
I feel like it's up to like judgment. I think it's definitely one of the big resource, like one of the big what's the right term, like one of the aspects of resource management that the player has to figure out is if you want to use your gauge on cancels, or if you want to save a lot of gauge to play like a strong Nazi Ruga. So again, it depends on the matchup, depends on given game, and it depends on the pace you want to play at, or how the way your opponent's playing. If they pressure you in a way where you do need to cancel, you need to get a bunch of speed in order to in order to deal with whatever their setups are, or it depends on like whether or not you end up using a lot of the cards that you would set up these speed boosts for something else. I don't have a straight answer for that, I guess.
Well, yeah,
my apologies.
I mean, the question that I asked you, Exceed is a resource management game. The question that I asked you, how do you use these resources, it could be interpreted as like, how do you play Exceed? That's a very open-ended question. I feel like you did as good as the question. You answered the question as well as anyone could have, I think.
Yeah.
So
I think it depends on. I think it depends on how much a player wants to put playing these 6-speed spikes into as part of the game plan. If they're less focused, if they're less like focused on hitting 6-speed dusts, then maybe the need to play 2 speed boost and cancel into something is like less than it would be otherwise.
Right. So if you don't value this as a payout, the things that set up the payout would get evaluated a little bit differently. Maybe you find yourself playing Beta Blade a little bit more often than maybe you find yourself playing Zansai Ruga as an ultra rather than as a boost more often. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're evaluating based on what payout you're going for. But the payouts that we're talking about for the most part, Exceed mode, your Ultra Spike, your Ultra Dust, and then these Ultras. So you're evaluating them based on that, and it's going to change based on player and matchup. Okay. So that's the kit. One thing that hasn't really, because Chipp is so flexible and has so many ways that he can annoy you and eventually beat you. One thing that hasn't really come up yet is like, how do you envision, how do I put this? Is Chipp a rushdown character? Is he a slow-paced defensive character? Is he a set play character? Can he kind of be all of those things depending on the matchup? Like, how do we categorize his, like, now we know his tools. How do we turn these tools into a game plan? Again, I apologize. That's an incredibly open-ended question. But, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't quite say he's a rushdown character because he doesn't have a lot of ways to pressure his opponent in terms of damage early on in the game, or even like particularly rewarding single cards that he can play. I think he's pretty good in neutral. He's very good at kind of tempo throughout the game, like just maintaining tempo throughout the game, and he's good at poking at the opponent and dodging out of the way. But also at the same time, since he does do a little bit less damage than average, perhaps, and since he draws a lot of cards, if he doesn't utilize his, or like depending on, it also may depend on his deck order. If he doesn't or isn't maybe fully able to utilize his cards in in the most efficient way, then he could like start to feel some deck pressure if the game goes on long enough. The opponent plays really defensively as well. But because of a lot of like ways to threaten above curve options and just avoid a lot of slower attacks, generally his neutral is pretty good. And so I guess in terms of game plan, just try to set up attacks that that can avoid getting hit back by. Try to set up attacks where you can try to avoid your opponent's counterattacks, and you'll, as your opponent's options grind down more, you can maybe threaten other attacks that you can play, and a common game plan to fall back on is to set up the 6-speed spike, which is like another unbeatable attack, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So in the early game, I'm not necessarily going for these big scary payouts. I am doing like, I'm gonna hit you for 2, and I'm gonna leave, and you're gonna miss, and I'm gonna get a gauge, and then over time that resource advantage accrues. I have enough resources to cash out on something bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I'm hitting you for 5, and there's nothing you can do about it. When you're talking about deck pressure, Chykka. So I'm coming at this mostly from a fighting game perspective. I know a lot of people who find Exceed are fighting game players who are like, what's a card game? And there's an equal number of people who have never played a fighting game who came from some other card game. When you're talking about deck pressure, I was wondering if you could go into that a little bit more explicitly. My understanding of it is basically like, because Exceed is a game based on mix-ups, the longer I can keep my options live, that my opponent has to deal with them, the fewer like holes I leave in my offense and my mix-ups, the less safe they are. Is that kind of what deck pressure is? That I'm basically just like maintaining my options as best I can over my opponent?
I think that's a big part of it, for sure. And the other aspect of it is kind of this notion that if both of us just like if both players just do things that are non-committal,
Right.
yeah, then whoever, like, whoever whoever's closer to losing from deck out is at a disadvantage. So they are more incentivized to commit to doing something that will help them win the game before that
Okay.
happens.
So
And then and because they're committing resources to doing something, then basically in terms of the overall game clock, like deck pressure means that one player is more incentivized to commit to taking actions that help them win the game. Like one player is more incentivized to do that than the other. I guess that's
okay.
that's like one that's one way. It's one way to put it, I think, at least.
So
Um,
in like extreme situations, like extreme non-interactive situations, if both players had something like there was a time in Exceed prior to season 7 where we had something called a CC0, a change card 0 for people who are new, that basically said like rather than uh rather than prepare, I'm going to do nothing on my turn and draw a single card. If two players, one Ryu is player 1, Chipp is player 2. At the beginning of the game, Ryu draws 5 cards for being player 1, Chipp draws 6. He has 1 fewer cards in his deck, and then both players spend the next 100 plus turns CC zeroing over and over again. Chipp loses because he has fewer cards remaining in his deck. That's like the ultimate endpoint of what deck pressure means, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So it's not something that's like as well for most in most games, and I guess for most players and for most matchups, it's not really something that to really like consider at the beginning of the game. It's just once you get to the mid and late game,
One,
and
once
some
one
reshuffles happen and a reshuffle happens, then it's
right
something to pay more attention to
now
see. Go
along
ahead.
the way while you're getting to that heat death of your deck, along the way options are dropping, right? And
Yeah,
now there's
yeah,
holes opening in your defenses, so it's not like a binary where like, okay, you've lost by deck pressure because you've completely run out of cards. Along the way you're losing by deck pressure because you have fewer things to respond to your opponent who has more
yes,
things live. I got you. Okay, so
yeah,
it's a gradual thing.
yeah, or I guess it could also be you have fewer things to actually kill your opponent with,
Sure. Okay. Sure.
as
Sure. Sure. So,
well.
and with Chipp, that could actually be a problem because like
Yeah,
his damage is low enough, you might
yeah,
actually not have the damage you need to kill somebody in some cases. So
yeah. That's where it's more relevant to him, and also because he is able to draw like cards like more like better like more easily than a lot of other characters. So he wants to make sure that he can make the most out of the cards he draws.
so
Which
I get a whole bunch of gauge. I've hit for 4 damage and generated 4 gauge over 4 turns because I'm Chipp and I don't do very much damage. Now I have a handful of cards and I spend all of them on canceling and I get a perfect setup to do 5 damage. And so that's 5 damage that I've done, and I've spent more than a third of my deck in cards engaged to get there. That is not an efficient use of resources enough to kill my opponent.
it's hard for me to like. I guess perhaps in the most abstract sense, that's probably like I guess that could be said.
Okay, so
I just personally don't know what like if I could do a calculation like
of course,
yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
I guess so. The reason that I'm talking about this is that the point that I'm trying to make is that in order for Chipp to win the game, he needs to turn his resource advantage into damage somehow, because
yeah.
otherwise he's drawing so many cards that he will lose the game by deck out potentially.
I think it I mean I think it comes down to how good of a defense your opponent's putting up against you, because if they are able to essentially mitigate the amount of damage they're taking and somehow drag the game out that late, then that's a concern. Like that's like one way to approach Chip, and the other way is just if you are able to land some really meaty punches into him that he can't avoid, then uh, then like deck pressure is not even going to be like
Right.
much of an issue because
You'll die
you
from loss of life long before deck pressure becomes a real thing.
yeah.
Okay. So, but the way that you think about Chipp, and the way that maybe we should advocate for people to think about Chipp if they haven't before, is he does these little pokes here and there, builds up resources, and then uses that resource and tempo advantage to force his opponent to play at a pace that they might not be comfortable with, and then exploits that. Does that sound right?
That I think that's I think that's right to an extent. Maybe it's a little bit overemphasized, and I think it does also depend on the the individual Chipp player's playstyle. But kind of more generally speaking, the resource advantage you accrue lets you play cancel chains and other there's strong strikes that that you're able to do because of the amount of resources you have at your disposal.
Oh, sure. Okay. So
Yeah.
the deck pressure is there as a emergency button if the game comes to that, but also just by getting all these cards engaged and all these resources, now I can start doing things that actually hurt them.
Yeah. And I wouldn't I guess it's always I think it's always a little bit tricky to talk about deck pressure when it comes to character game plans, for most characters at least, that don't obviously a different character like King Knight, who really just does go through his deck really fast, kind of is that often finds himself at a disadvantage due to deck pressure. That's kind of much less the case with Chipp. And he has an average size deck, so and just generally I think games that most players play typically don't go to the point where deck pressure is is a concerning factor. So I think we're putting a little bit too much emphasis on how deck pressure plays into Chipp's strengths and weaknesses. But I think the initial in terms of the context that I mentioned, in terms of the context that I initially mentioned, concepts, it just mostly had to do with it being a potential weakness of Chipp should the game go that late, and he didn't get the strikes he wanted to deal out the damage.
Didn't find the damage. Okay, yeah. So that was my misread on the situation. And viewers at home, I apologize for that rabbit hole that I just took everybody down. We learned about deck pressure in the process. I feel like, and I learned about deck pressure in the process. I feel like that's a win overall. Thank you for the patience there, Chykka. Sorry about that.
All right.
So we've got our kit. We've got some strong lines of play that we can use with that kit. It seems like the actual game plan that we need to come up with is too reactive and too opponent specific, too playstyle specific to really be distilled down into a digestible chunk for this video, which is totally fine, right? Exceeds a complicated game.
I think that, in terms of talking about Chipp's game plan, I think you could you can more or less simplify it down to play attacks that don't get where you play attacks in which your opponent's not able to respond to by hitting you back with, and try to dodge their biggest threats using your UA, and then using your character UA, your character ability to maintain the tempo of the game by repositioning yourself to to a board state where you're more ready to do the things you want, and more ready to respond to the things your opponent can throw at you.
Okay, that all makes sense. So you're playing a positional game using your tools to get to you're winning by damage eventually, probably, but you are winning more by making your opponent whiff, which tracks.
Yeah. The whole idiom of kill your opponent by 1,000 cuts does apply to Chipp. I guess he is a ninja,
right.
But you do, and there are you do have ways to deal a higher amount of damage. And often and sometimes that just happens normally because Chip is okay with trading, sweep for sweep, focus for focus, right? But I guess besides that, he does have ways to he does have some places where he can deal a bit more damage.
He's
got
Alpha Blade. He's got his Spike Play. He's got his Ultra.
Yeah.
He's got both his Ultras, actually, mostly this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any interactions, like we've actually already talked about quite a few things with his normals that, cross can get you out of positions that normally you wouldn't be able to, sweep dodges or grasp dodges, sweep, all that stuff. So there's a lot of ways that his normals interact with his ability. Are there any normals that you value particularly highly as Chipp? Obviously, Spike and Dive, Dust and Dive give you payouts that you might need to kill your opponent. I'm assuming you want strong defensive options. Among the normal boosts, are there any that are particularly strong with Chipp that you more so than they would be for another character? Anything that we value differently?
I think an interesting. I think I might be echoing. Through your mic.
What's that?
I might be echoing through your mic just now.
Oh, okay.
But it's gone.
I'm not hearing it on my side, but so we should be okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, so with Grasp, I think how you decide to use Grasp in a given game can be pretty important because as an attack, it has a lot of utility in terms of being able to dodge sweep, but also just being able to avoid range 3 mix-ups. Although generally you want to be able to hit with it, for the gauge and the damage, instead of just using it as a kind of a poor man's cross. But the boost can also be pretty good because you have so many fast attacks because you have so many fast attacks, you're likely to get the hit effect off to get the extra gauge, and also it gives you +1 power, which is nice. So I think how you use this card is an interesting decision to make when you play Chipp. Other normal boosts. I think Chipp likes playing cross as well because he just likes dodging hits, right?
Right, yeah, and this card dodges hits for people who aren't Chipp, right? Chipp gets even more mileage out of it, but this is your dodging card. Of course Chipp would like it.
Yeah. In terms of the boosts, the normal boosts, I don't really have too much to say about them. Badass can often be used in conjunction with other speed boosts to play your really strong mid speeds.
Your payouts, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But also, obviously, focus and sweep your trading cards, and Chipp is not about damage. Here's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So for the most part, we would evaluate our normals and their boosts the same as we would for another character, except that Chipp has this additional positional flexibility, and a lot of times with some of his pokes, even with some of his slow attacks, it lets him set up for later strikes or dodge things. So there's that additional layer of it on top. Sorry, I sound like I just cut you off. Sorry, Chykka.
No. I was just gonna say I agree.
Okay. Sounds good. So then, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was a little bit about counterplay. So you've described all the stuff that Chipp can do. My opponent is a very competent Exceed player, and they know exactly how to deal with Chipp. What are they doing to stop him? And is there anything that Chipp should be doing differently to deal with that counterplay? I'm hitting you with nothing but incredibly open-ended questions tonight, Chykka.
I think so generally you want to avoid Chipp being able to hit you and not being able to hit them back. But really much more the latter, I guess. So you want to try to play attacks that have really good hit confirm, which Chipp can't dodge out of, and then because only some of his options deal a significant amount of damage. If you can keep up that kind of pressure, um, then you should be able to like out damage him over the course of the game. And Chip, a lot of Chip's cards by themselves are like maybe not the most reliable against certain options. So his wild swing quality at certain ranges might be can sometimes be, I guess, a bit lacking against certain options that you might have. So you generally want to try to set up strikes where you can cover like his outs. Whether that be like just something that hits at ranges 1 to 4, or like maybe scramble can, like, if he happens, like if you play scramble in the Chip, for example, maybe he'll flip over one of these two cards, and they're not very good defensively in a lot of situations, without any boosts or anything like that in play, or I mean, sometimes even with boosts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to hit a 3-speed card in melee that he just wild swung, you got a lot of ways to do it. A 2-speed even more so. Boosts are not. Excuse me.
Yeah. And Chip can be like kind of surprisingly. I mean, he's like a combo character, so he's like kind of surprisingly like he likes having like certain combination, like certain card combinations to play off of. So when he doesn't have those, then his ability to like kind of respond well could be maybe a little bit awkward or more limiting. Of course, that's like hard. That's kind of like maybe hard to gauge as a player playing against the Chip, but or at least maybe it also depends on a Chip's particular play style. But yeah, it's generally fine. I think either play like if your character has cards that hit at a wide range band, or just you're able to set up like attacks that are able to deal with his above curve options, then you're likely going to be able to hit him for more damage than he hits you for. You might even, and it's especially good if you are able to win a bunch of clean strikes against him, because then that puts you at the life advantage, and then it puts the onus on him to like set up, to spend a bunch of resources to commit to.
It's all in terms of him and another character's damage output. It's already like an uphill battle for him to deal more damage than his opponent. If he loses a strike clean, that makes his job way harder to make up that difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just that, well, I mean, I guess uphill battle is it's like true in one sense, but also like he does have a lot of options, a lot of ways to threaten attacks that where he just hits you for free. So in that sense, the opponent has an uphill battle, because they have to make sure that they don't just give Chip free, they don't just give Chip they just don't it could be an uphill battle to get out of situations where Chip can just where a player can just let Chip wail on them for free, essentially.
Right, because they've run out of the thing that the one move that they have that he can't dodge easily, and now he's got free reign of the board for a while until they rebuild their resources. I gotcha. Okay.
And I guess in that sense, that's one aspect of deck pressure that can work in Chip's favor, is that if a character is like maybe more limited on options that are really good at covering a lot of range, then as that character uses them up, they might become much more vulnerable to things that Chip can do. So it's like a lot about managing your options properly to deal with what Chip is able to do both offensively and defensively. And a lot of that comes down to like playing attacks that if you play something slow, make sure that it covers a lot of range. But if you're able to play things that are fast, that's also good, because Chip relies on a lot of Chip's defenses rely on just being able to outspeed the opponent, dodge them. But if you can play something that's faster, then he'll have to rely on his slows to, counter hit you.
And he does not have a lot of those.
Yeah.
Okay, so he could run out of those important options too if you're able to pressure those resources in him, just like he's pressuring your resources.
Yeah. And I guess Chipp always, if he has Chipp as gauge, then he does have this 9 speed, which is really hard to outspeed. In which case, you can try to bait it out with something slow, or you can try to parry it.
Right.
Or you can just try to, or if you think like the math works out in your favor, you can maybe force him to play it, and then
you can get hit by it, right? And then you're like, all right, cool, that's 2 or more cancels you can't do anymore.
Yeah, but that's definitely a trickier proposition. That like maybe it's something to consider. But yeah, I guess that's a lot of the counterplay to Chipp.
Okay, punch him really hard, make him trade, don't let him dodge, keep his resources under pressure, keep your resources live. That all sounds good to me. All right. So, Chykka, anything else that you want to cover about Chipp while I have you here, or should we wrap it up?
I think we got most of it covered. I don't really have too many other thoughts or too many other points to make. Right, like off the top of my head, I guess.
All right. Sounds good. Well, in that case, Chykka, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, as always.
You're welcome.
Real pleasure talking to you. Learned a lot. Excited to try this guy out. Everybody at home, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Yeah, really excited to talk to you again soon, Chykka, and I will see you all for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.